Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time are you connecting and in the time zone you're at the moment. Welcome to today's webinar about emerging opportunities across consumer and enterprises for MVNO. This webinar is brought to you by MDS Global. My name is Dario Tesio. I'm a research director for Omdia, and I will be your moderators for today's event. Before we start, let me explain a couple of housekeeping rules. First, this webinar can be moved around your screen and resized just as any other window application. And by dragging on the title of the bar, you can resize and move things around. An important feature of this webinar is your participation. Let's keep it interactive. On your left-hand side, you will see a Q&A window. Please feel free to drop your questions and push submit button in the window, so we will see your questions, which we will address after the presentation. Today's session is going to be recorded, by the way, and is going to be available on demand. An email will be sent to you when the webinar is available in the archive. Joining me today, we have Steve Bowen, Chief Executive Officer of MDS Global. Steve has a very long track record as an executive, 25 years of leadership experience. Is not only the CEO of MDS Global, but is also the board member of Jovoto, a Berlin-based creative co-creation business. Of course, before MDS, Steve spent a considerable amount of time at Accenture and at Exchanging, a business process outsourcing company. Full bios of the speakers today are available for you to deep dive into their business persona. Then we have Tony Bobowicz, VP of Sales for MDS Global. Tony has equally 25 years of experience in the telecommunication industry, delivering OSS and BSS IT-based technology solution. Tony worked for several projects involving Tier 1 CSPs and MVNOs. And finally, we have Farid Yunus. Just like Stephen and Tony, Farid is a veteran in the MVNO industry. He recently, well, not so recently, in 2019, he rejoined redONE. He returned as a CEO of redONE after going off and launching an MVNO, UDO, in Malaysia, which is the first truly customizable digital mobile service owned by Celcom Axiata. Celcom Axiata, where Farid spent time as a Chief Strategy and Business Transformation Officer, responsible for technology and market strategies and business planning. So plenty of experience. We have 75 years of experience combined already here. Now, before we start getting into the topic of the conversation today, let me say a couple of words about what we are discussing today. Obviously, we are discussing MVNO's opportunities. Obviously, we are looking at how the market is changing and where to find opportunities for yourself and your partners. So amongst these macro trends, I think there are some that have the potential of really changing the telecom industry, but probably even more so the MVNO industry. Now, the first macro trend is that the structures of the industries, of the telecom industry is changing. We see more separation between the running the network and the fulfillment and the selling of the services, something that we also refer to as structural separation. And of course, 5G is a catalyst for that change to eventually accelerating. Now, another important change that we see in the MVNO industry is that there are new markets opening up. for those of you who, like me and the presenters today, have been following and working within the MVNO industry, you will see that especially many Asian markets are now opening up to the MVNO opportunity for the first time. But there is one thing that is not changing within the MVNO market. It's where the real value is. And the real value, you will see more in the presentation later on, the real value is in the interface, is in the customer-facing activities. And those MVNOs who really can crack that are the ones that tend to succeed in market. But even that aspect is changing, is modernizing, is digitizing, and for that reason we are going to be talking about the most radical transformation in customer-facing interfaces, which is eSIM, and we'll learn about the opportunities that eSIM will be bringing to market for MVNOs, and talk about what we refer to as digital first. But without further ado, I want to pass on to the first speaker of today's webinar. Steve, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Dario. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks very much for attending. I just wanted to start the presentation with a brief look at the current market. You know, as we know, the service provider consumer market is really quite congested. There are pockets of developing nations where there's some opportunity to connect the unconnected, but by and large, what we're seeing is that revenue growth from connections has slowed predominantly to the 1 to 2% region. I think a lot of the market is being taken at the moment by the over the top internet players, and you know a survey by Omdia report just recently suggested that those internet players' market shares increased from about 29% to 40% over the last 4 years, while the CSP share has reduced from 70 to 58%. CFP revenue and internet players continue to outgrow these service providers, although they actually rely on your network to make that happen. So players have tried to look at the IoT market to see if they can actually recover some of their lost revenues. But what they're seeing is that the connection value there is only sort of 5% of what is now currently a 1.1 trillion market. IoT and M2M typically doesn't really rely too much on GSM. It's relying a lot more on Wi-Fi or technologies such as LoRa, although people are saying that 5G could potentially take some of that connectivity back to the MVNO players. Actually, the real value is being driven by the platforms, the applications, and the professional services. And finally, again, trying to recover some of those lost revenues, you've got a lot of players trying to deliver some non-telco services, whether it be streaming services or gaming services, but nevertheless, those revenues haven't really started to come through. So as you can see, it's very difficult in this market to differentiate. At the moment, most players look like each other. They're differentiating potentially mostly around price. And as we all know, that if you're differentiating on price, ultimately that's a race to the bottom. And I don't think any of us want to go there. If we actually look at the market, in the last 5 years, whilst the real sort of term value of the MVNO capture of the market has gone up from 3.5 to 4.6 billion. Nevertheless, it's still only a very, very small percentage of what is the overall retail market. That's still very much dominated by the MNOs. But nevertheless, I think there was a poll done of the attendees coming to this presentation. And despite that slow growth over the last 5 years, I think the sentiment remains, quite positive. So I think, that's something to be grateful for. So as Dario mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the interface is definitely where the profit seems to be. You've got a lot of people out there, disruptors, entrepreneurs, who have captured that market, that customer interface, and they're exploiting it to their ends. The classics, the Ubers, the Airbnbs, the Netflix, the Amazon. These are companies that have captured the interface and are exploiting it for massive profits, but actually relying on the networks that you provide. A good example of somebody that's making great headway in this space is our next presenter, which is Farid from redONE. They're exploiting this interface marvelously, and you'll hear about how that's going in just a few minutes. I think if MVNOs are going to want to compete in this marketplace going forward, they're going to have to understand how they can capture that customer interface and leverage it more than they're currently doing, whether they can optimize around a particular market strategy or a particular retail strategy. The entrepreneurs and the disruptors are going to have to figure out how to capture that interface if they're going to survive in what will become a very competitive market, I think, going forward. Next slide. So what we're going to talk about over the next couple of slides, I'll talk a few minutes about some of the trends that we see emerging in terms of how the market is restructuring itself. I'll then hand over to Tony Bobowicz, who'll talk a little bit about the challenges that are in the market today around an underserved community, typically those that digital communities and businesses and enterprises who currently today represent a good opportunity for the MVNO market. And then Tony will also talk through some of the technology that's emerging, frictionless technology, whether it be eSIMs or cloud hosting, and what they're able to present us as MVNOs. Now, if we look at the market today, we see a lot of MNOs and a lot of MVNOs sitting on top of those platforms, and they're operating with not too much differentiation. We've already discussed earlier that the only differentiation that generally is in the market today is around price, and clearly that's not going to serve the future for them. However, a study recently done by McKinsey has shown how a lot of the telcos are looking at how they might be able to separate their network businesses into a netco and their service businesses into service companies. Recently, Telefonica Poland was a study by McKinsey, and they demonstrated that by doing this separation, there was significant shareholder value created, as much as 85% of new capital growth, by being able to separate those two businesses out. The other thing that this allows you to do is at the service company level, you can start to optimize your operations around a particular market segment. You can align your employees, you can align your culture, and you can align your whole marketing around a specific niche. So what we then see is we see service companies evolving that are targeting very, very specific requirements. An example might be, let's take the purple circle, finance. Here, with the advent of 5G, we could develop an MVNO that's providing very low latency, high speed bandwidth operations to traders on their mobile phone. So no longer are traders and hedge fund managers, whomever they might be, are tied to their desk with their high speed networks into the stock exchange. That same level of service can be provided through the mobile phone, and hence they can be trading wherever they may decide to be. Another highly emerging opportunity is in esports. Again, another example where a low latency, high speed bandwidth is absolutely critical to ensure that there's no disadvantage gained by one player against another. So what you see is MVNOs emerging, targeting a very specific niche. And with the advent of 5G, a single MVNO using different slices of the 5G network could deliver very different propositions, targeting very different market segments at the same time. And of course, with the separation of the network businesses away, then they're also able to interact with as many different network companies as they choose fit. Yes, of course, they're going to have a transaction charge with the networks, but they're used to doing that anyway. This is all about tailoring their front end to meet their customer need and start to grab hold of that interface. So with that as a sort of a backdrop, I'm going to hand over to Tony now, who should be able to start to take you through some of the challenges and opportunities that we're seeing emerging now.
Thanks, Steve. I'm going to talk about some, as Steve points out, I'm going to talk about some of the underserved markets and what opportunity that presents to the MVNO. If you look at the family marketplace, today, if I take my own experience, I have 4 family members, each spread across different service providers. I receive 4 bills for each of the members of my family. There's no concept of shared quota. I have little or no control over the way they consume and buy services. And oddly enough, they all seem to be on slightly different tariffs with slightly different plans. So one of them might have 5 gig for £10 a month, another might have 8 gig for the same price. Imagine a scenario where earlier we talked about how important the interface is. Imagine a scenario where each of the family members have their own interface or application to self-serve. So, for example, the family member has an application to request services to the administrator, and in this case, that would be me, where they could say one of my children could actually send a request to me asking whether they could have a top-up this month of data or a top-up of voice minutes, and I could approve or deny that, just as I could approve or deny access to other services, such as content, such as roaming or premium rate calls. So that scenario is providing a digital experience for both the family member and the administrator of the family, effectively putting us in complete control of the way we buy and consume those services. If I go to the right and consider the SME marketplace, so the small medium companies, we know that 96% of businesses in Europe are actually made up by SMEs with an average number of employees of 6 people. We also happen to know that the average number of service providers is 2.6. So what we see is the same set of challenges faced by the family user that I just described in the SME marketplace. However, there is added complexity, and that imagine a scenario where perhaps an administrator of a small company with maybe 10, 50, 100 employees could have that same level of control over the way the employees use and consume services. Perhaps have a shared quota across 50 or 100 employees, maximizing or optimizing the data bundle that I'm buying from my service provider. And then if we start to look at going right of the SME to the medium-large enterprise, we see that the medium-large enterprise today have a high demand for other services in addition to their mobile services. And they're not just wanting to buy mobile communications. You know, they want to be able to secure application connectivity, security and protection systems, IP and voice comms. Today, a lot of the B2B providers in the marketplace, whether the MNO or the MVNO, are pulling services from a number of disparate providers, but are not providing them back to the enterprise in a seamless way. So imagine a scenario where a B2B MVNO could procure multiple services, aggregate them into a single bundle, and deliver that to a customer as a complete solution rather than a number of separate services. And then if we look further to the right in terms of IoT, I think everyone's been very excited about IoT, with the exception of the fact that there's been very little revenue achieved in the IoT market. One thing's for sure, that I don't see the MVNO or the MNO making money from selling data for IoT devices. And what we see, I like to use a scenario where I talk about perhaps an example where the Premier Football League, create a service whereby they pull together a number of complementary assets and co-create a solution that they can take to market. So in this example, it might be that the consumer walks into the stadium, they see a barcode that they click on, and they can join a service provided by the Premiership that will give them preferential access to data and content whilst they're in the stadium. They got access to things like buying tickets and football strips through a virtual mall that's served up to them via the app on the device. In order to deliver that service, there's a number of co-creators that need to come together with complementary assets. So, for example, you need a video streaming vendor that's going to provide the content. You need the content itself. The MVNO may procure a 5G slice of the network from the MNO to provide a dedicated radio access network specifically for the service of the Premiership, where they're guaranteeing service level and service quality. So I think it's really important to understand that it's about providing a platform and an overall solution to serve the IoT market. It's not just about the data that serves the devices. And then if we look at, Dario touched on the opportunity that eSIM brings. I think we all know enough about eSIM to understand what it means. It brings huge opportunity in terms of being able to acquire subscribers far more easily, or with a frictionless approach. So as a subscriber, I could walk into a football stadium, see a provider perhaps sponsored by a celebrity such as Ronaldo saying, click on this and you'll get click on this barcode and you'll get a special deal. I load the app. I have a very friendly app that enables me to subscribe to the service, but more importantly, perhaps pick my plan and particular content that I might want access to, as well as deciding how many bytes and how much voice I want. And then I can build that plan. But we already know today that tech-savvy subscribers, and I'll talk about an example in a moment, like and generally promote brands as a positive, as a result of a positive experience. So I go in, I sign up, I join the Premiership football plan, I create my own custom plan, but then I decide to share that with my buddy. So I can, via the app, click on a link and share my plan using a barcode to share to my plan. Not sure why that jumped backwards then. Somebody must be touching the screen. Apologies for that. So I want to talk about an example of a company that was an early adopter in building an interface or a way of their customers accessing service that was very, what I like to consider Uber-esque, in that the customer was in complete control of the way they buy and consume services. ID Mobile launched in the UK a little over 5 or 6 years ago. They focused on the tech-savvy market, serving up a digital platform where the name ID actually came from iDecide. So the subscriber decided how many bytes, how they pay for service, what services they access, self-imposed credit limits. So, for example, a subscriber could say, I don't want to go above £20 and I want you to notify me when I hit £15 so that I avoid any kind of bill shock. This operator, without any advertising, which lays testament to the promoter model in the tech-savvy subscribers promote to their friends, grew to 1.1 million subscribers in a little under 2 years, which was unprecedented growth. The other thing is that they have significantly higher ARPU, and I know that redONE have achieved a similar thing in their market. They've bucked the trend and have got increased ARPU across their subscriber base. But importantly, because the customer has a self-serve model, they've driven down their cost to serve their customer, reduced costs in the call center, and have put the subscriber back in control. So I'm now going to pass you over to Farid to talk to you about the redONE go-to-market.
Thank you, Tony. Well, redONE isn't quite like ID Mobile, or even UDO for that matter, which we did at Celcom a couple of years back. Some of you may already be familiar with redONE, having spoken at many of these MVNO conferences. But just as a recap, just in case, we started out in 2008. Previously, we were known as redONE Mobile and as the only postpaid MVNO in Malaysia. But in 2012, three of us took over. I was seconded from Celcom at the time Chief MVNO Officer. So it's a bit of a incestuous relationship. And we relaunched redONE Mobile as redONE in 2012, or redone, as we like to say. We redid the company, so redone in 2012. Still, our main USP was having the lowest postpaid plan in the market for $2 USD, 8 ringgit, $2 US a month. You could you could have a postpaid no contract subscription. And as you can see from the slide, our revenues have grown, a slight dip in 2017 when the market went mad. But since then, we've managed to do double-digit growth, 28% last year. But even though our subscriber growth has remained flat at about 1.2 million postpaid subs, we've managed to move people from $8 ringgit plans to 28, 48, and now 58 and 68 plans. So when you first start out as a cheap budget postpaid provider, people are willing to give you a try. I think our penetration rate in Malaysia is upward of 140%. So multi-SIM, everyone has more than one SIM. And once they tried you out as a secondary or even third SIM, they gain confidence. They then migrate you up and become their primary SIM. So which is why our revenue continues to grow robustly. We've added more value-added services on top, unlimited social, unlimited video, unlimited music, all for an additional top-up, which people have been subscribing to, as the revenue has shown. And why we're very different from ID Mobile or even UDO and all these digital MVNOs is that we rely on direct selling. We rely on an army of 15,000 individuals who go out and sell. So we appoint these normal dealers, which we call neighborhood centers. We have around 2,000 of them, physical locations. Some are exclusive, some are not. They are multi-brand. And we also have 100 what we call premier shops. But these guys, their main role is as a stockist, recruit and train individuals to be our agents. And as you can see, we paid out 90 million ringgit last year. So our commissions have gone up just as our revenue has gone up, because we did three things differently from the existing telcos in Malaysia. The first, of course, is allowing individuals to sell postpaid. Now, in the past, if you wanted to sell a postpaid line, you needed to see a utility bill, you needed to fill in forms in triplicate, and you had to sign a 1 year or 2 year contract. So we turned it on its head. Anyone could sell postpaid. The second was we enabled them with the first paperless postpaid registration system, what we call MREG. So the customer can just tick, tick, tick what they want. I know it seems very quaint now, but believe you me, back in 2014, this was groundbreaking in Malaysia. And so you have a IC card reader, and they just scan the IC, and they sign on the tablet, and Bob's your uncle, the SIM card is activated. So this allowed our 15,000 individuals to sit by the roadside, outside a bank, wherever, doing roadshows and signing up people wherever, whenever. So this was revolutionary at the time. And the third thing we did differently was, instead of giving our dealers, our agents, a one-time upfront incentive, we gave them a very small upfront incentive. And instead, we give them a recurring share of the customer's bill every month, forever, as long as the customer remains a customer and continues to pay their bill. So what this resulted in is we had much less fraud, because dealers defraud postpaid telcos all the time by signing up fake customers, taking the money and running away. In this case, there wasn't much to be made up front. The other consequence was we have very low bad debt, because unless the customer pays the bill, they're not going to get their commission. So they will chase the customer, hey, please pay the bill. And you also tend to get good, legitimate customers instead of those who intend to defraud you from the start. So those are the three main things that have enabled us to grow to 10% of the postpaid market here in Malaysia today. And because we have a very low entry plan, 8 ringgit, we also see a lot of prepaid to postpaid migration. So nearly half of our customer acquisitions every month are actually prepaid users switching to postpaid for the first time with redONE. But we recognize that there are limitations to our model. There are limitations to the Malaysian market. I think 1 or 2 million will be the max. We've got 2 other active MVNOs here, and collectively we have upwards of 3 million subscribers. 3 million subscribers in a 40 million subscriber market. So there are limitations. So we began diversifying, and now we have our Red Mall, where you can buy devices. We don't source them directly, we just range them, and when you order them, we will order for you. We're the only MVNO to work with a credit company, so you can actually buy a phone on hire purchase and apply via redONE's Red Mall. We sell Red Care, we sell health insurance, we sell car insurance, and we bill the customer for the premiums in their postpaid bill and pass that back to the insurers. What this means is our dealers who also get a percentage of the bill are getting a percentage of this insurance premium as well. And so we're just adding more and more products for our partners to sell that are non-telco. And the commissions we receive from all this are already in the six figures, and this is despite doing this for less than 6 months. We also sell credit cards. So if you want to sign up to a HSBC card, a UOB card, you can apply via redONE, and you get additional benefits if you are a redONE customer. And so the point of the right-hand slide of this is, yes, you can go online and buy all these things through our website, but you can also walk into any of our shops. Any of our individual agents can also upsell you a credit card, riding on the license to do so that we procure. So we've given our partners more opportunity to sell rather than just postpaid services. So that's how we're diversifying our products and services. The second one is digitalization of how we go to market, how we recruit our partners, and how we onboard customers. So people say, hey, Farid, the way you guys do through individuals, human-to-human selling, this is incompatible with the digital future. Well, sure. But the question I always ask these people is, when is the last time you clicked on a Facebook ad and bought something? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is going to be never. Whereas, if over Christmas you go back to your hometown and your cousin rocks up to you and says, hey, have you heard of redONE? You say, no. What are you using? Oh, I'm using Celcom. Well, hey, why don't you try redONE? It's only $2 a month, and you'll be helping me out, dude, because I'm a redONE agent, and if you sign up, you'll help me make some money. You're much, much more likely to give it a try than a Facebook ad, whom we should boycott, by the way, but that's a separate discussion. But so how do you find our agents? So the first thing we've done is we are Uberizing that. So if you download the app and then you say, I want to sign up, just like a Grab or Uber, our nearest agent can decide to accept that request and arrange to go and meet the prospective customer, where there they will explain the plans, explain the benefits, etc., and sign up the customer on the spot. So that's step one. Do not underestimate, not everyone is tech savvy. Not everyone knows how to compare 5 different telco plans to see what's the best value for their usage, but our agent will meet you and he will explain. The second one is the whole eKYC thing. So right now you have a couple of providers in Malaysia who provide full digital onboarding where the customer can do their own eKYC. Now, if we went this way, we would disintermediate our network of dealers, which we don't want to do. So what we're doing now, we're putting in place a digital platform whereby when a customer says, hey, I'm interested, they can do the eKYC, but the SIM card will be sent to them not by us, but by a nominated dealer. So this way, the customer still gets an agent who is responsible to help them with any issues they may have, who they can follow up with any questions, and also in future for bill payment, for SIM replacement, they will have a dealer assigned to them, even though they did their own onboarding. And similarly, we want to enable people to do this omni-channel. So you can go from our Facebook site, you click on something, I'm interested, within there, you can eKYC and onboard yourself, choose your phone number, your preferred number, and get assigned a dealer who will then send you your SIM and support you. So I'm anticipating someone asking me, so what about eSIM? What if there's no physical SIM involved? What are your dealers? Why do you need dealers? Why do you need to pay them? Well, we still think that person-to-person selling is very important. So when eSIM, we're in the midst of implementing eSIM, and all our dealers will have their own unique QR code. So it's almost like business as usual, but instead of doing a roadshow with a backpack full of SIM cards, they'll have a roadshow with a smaller backpack with just a QR code. So once they've convinced the customer that, hey, redONE is the way to go, they sign up the customer, they will just tell the customer with an eSIM-capable phone, please scan this QR code. And so that way, we can still identify the customer to that dealer and continue to pay the dealer commissions based on acquiring those customers. So again, we don't disintermediate them. We still use them as our army of marketers and salespeople on the ground. And so in the past, when you sign up agents, they have a shelf life. Some of them end up becoming very successful, and they sign up with thousands of lines, and they earn a very good income. We're not MLM. We don't promise you'll be a millionaire and you'll have a Ferrari, but a 5-digit passive income, 10, 15,000 ringgit a month is very doable. But those who don't quite work out, they drop off. So it's a constant process of recruiting new sales agents. And this is typically done through physical seminars where they come, they listen to our scheme, they listen to our plans. But we're moving that all virtually. So you just need to download, if you're interested to become a redONE agent, you download the app. Within that, we will do the training, the e-learning, how to refer your friends, all communications, new product comms, new commission comms will all be via the app. And we can monitor your performance and improve through data analysis. And once you're certified, you can start selling. And all that's going to happen virtually moving forward. We hope to launch this by August. So we're trying to still maintain a bit of our traditional model while modernizing it. And MCO, our movement control order, was a huge wake-up call. We saw our sales drop from 1,500, 2,000 lines a day down to 100, 200 lines a day. In fact, we were scratching our heads. How are our dealers still signing people up? And what they were doing was just doing Facebook marketing, Insta marketing. And when the prospect said, I'm interested, they give them a call and mail them the SIM card. And we loosened our rules around the customer actually having to sign the MREG to sign up. They could just email their IC pictures. But it's not good for the long term. We need to have a proper official digital onboarding process that our dealers can comply with. How are we adapting? Again, recognizing that Malaysia has a limited potential. We launched in Singapore last July. Hi, Ahmad. I believe our colleague from M1 is on board, is listening in right now. He's been messaging me. Hi, Ahmad. We plan to launch in Thailand in November this year. That's been delayed because of COVID. And also the Philippines before the end of this year. We'll be buying into that market. And the goal is to have a single ASEAN SIM, so multi-profile. Wherever you go, you will be using local data charges. Now, here in Malaysia, when we first launched back in 2008, we actually used a homegrown postpaid platform. But as the years have gone by, as our subscriber base has gone up, we realized that we need to change and adopt a kind of best of breed and also add in an OCS instead of just a BSS, because we are also doing prepaid now. And to expand to other countries, that's why I'm here today, because we selected MDS to be our vendor for Thailand and potentially migrate over our existing Malaysian operations and as well as Singapore and the Philippines. So yeah, if you have regional ambitions, I guess you need to go with a regional capable player, or players at least. And that's our ambition, to be the biggest MVNO in ASEAN. Our strength is our network. Yeah, that's me right in front there, rallying the troops. These are our top 1,000 dealers whom we invite to a big casino on a hill every year. And that's it. Thank you very much. I hope that was informative, or at least not boring.
Thank you very much, Farid. That was... Over to you, Dario.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Farid. And thank you all. It was all very insightful and very exciting to hear from you guys. Just a reminder for the audience, if you have any question, I've seen that so many questions have already been submitted, but if you have any, this is a reminder for you to submit additional ones now. And let me start with the first one that came in for Farid. As you were explaining your business model and your operations, there was a very straightforward question for you about your setup, whether you are a full MVNO or a light MVNO, so to speak.
Well, no, we're not a thick MVNO. We're not a full MVNO. We interface into Celcom, our network provider here, via their own API gateway. We do our own billing, our postpaid billing. And so they will throw us the CDRs every few minutes. And every 30 days, we bill the customer. We do our own customer care So we do our own product design and definitions, our own catalog, but we do not have a PCRF, GGSN, SMS, SC, all those we rely on Celcom. That said, in Thailand we will be a full MVNO. In Singapore, we are not. In Singapore also, we go via StarHub's MVNE. So it's a bit of a hybrid, depending on the market, depending on the telco, and how willing they are, and how deep they're willing to let you go.
Thank you, Farid. And the next question we have is for Tony. And it's probably a question, but also a comment about something you mentioned. And you described how differentiation is happening today. And aren't we going into a market where customers just get unlimited bundles and then differentiate only on the applications that they have or they want to subscribe to? What's your view? How is the market evolving?
Yeah, I mean, we have seen some all-you-can-eat plans come to market, and I think the reason for that is that what the players in those markets are focusing on is the bearer technology. So they're thinking about how they sell minutes, how they sell data, rather than thinking about how do I add value and differentiate myself to the subscriber. So a lot of that is, I gave some examples earlier about, the Premiership League, where they might pull together content and other services. I think it's about finding your niche in the market and serving that customer well. Farid talks about serving the post-paid community in Malaysia and shortly in Thailand and already in Singapore. They add differentiation to their service. They have a virtual mole. They do have some services that are all you can eat, such as music and such like, but it's about creating plans and services that perhaps you might have all you can eat social media, but for web browsing, I might be paying on a per byte basis. But I think, if you consider all you can eat plans, it's just a race to the bottom. And sooner or later you're going to hit bottom. So my view is that you need to try harder. The MVNOs need to try much harder to focus on a niche market and serve that market well.
Thank you, Tony. And we have a follow-up for Farid that just got on top of my queue. You mentioned eSIM, which, by the way, a comment from myself, is very fascinating how you merge the digital world with the physical one. And so the question is specifically on your eSIM platform, whether you have your own eSIM platform or you use the one that is provided by your MNO partners.
Well, Celcom has put in its own eSIM platform, but the amount they wanted to charge us was ridiculous. So we went out and found our own eSIM platform. As long as you can get the KU or the SIM profile, which Celcom was willing to give us, you can go out and do your own eSIM, which is what we did.
Okay. And I assume that is for your Malaysian market.
Correct. And in Thailand, I imagine we'll be doing the same.
Okay, thank you, Farid. Thank you for providing more an honest view on and a clear view on what you're going to do and how you see that technology playing in your own network. So the other question is about the success of MVNOs. Can MVNOs be successful without an active and ongoing support from their MNO partners? I think this is a recurring theme within the MVNO industry. And is there a natural cap of the potential of the MVNO market which is given by your business model or by the differentiation you might or might not have in your market? So it's two-part question. One is about the relationship with the MVNO, with your own MNO, and it's addressed specifically to to Farid. I guess you played both roles in your career. You were MNO side and MVNO side. You can give us both views on that.
Absolutely. The number one factor behind an MVNO's success or failure is the support of the MNO, which is why from the 18 MVNOs that were previously in existence in Malaysia, we're down to 3 that are still making money. And all 3 are Celcom MVNOs. And for that, I think it's due to the previous chief MVNO officer's foresight and wisdom that Celcom's MVNOs are successful. We moved to a revenue share model. We were the first in the region or perhaps the world to do so, because the wholesale rates, when competition kicks in, the retail rates start falling faster than the wholesale rates. And you can't go back to your MNO every 3 months asking to renegotiate wholesale rates. MNOs are so slow moving that it takes them 6 months just to make a decision, if you know what I mean. And so the best way was to move to a rev share model, but Celcom has to approve the retail plans that the MVNO intends to launch. It's a bit more work involved for the MNO. I mean, the lazy way is to say, here's your wholesale rate, $5 a gig, take it or leave it, do whatever plans you want, you sink or swim on your own. And that's the model that 95% of MNOs take towards the MVNOs. Whereas Celcom had a clear-cut segmentation of its MVNOs versus its own products and how they would dovetail and complement each other. I won't go into that. That's the subject for a whole different presentation. So we were happy that our MVNOs grew, Celcom that is. But in a way, the second part of that question, yes, is there a cap? Well, call me cynical, but I think if an MNO starts seeing an MVNO do so much more better than their own sales and marketing people, despite having the similar kind of cost base, some sort of jealousies will kick in there. Even till today, the main reason Celcom salespeople say they fail to achieve their targets is they blame Celcom's own MVNOs, neglecting the fact that most of the churn is going to the MNO competitors and not to us. So yeah, I think at some point, and we've seen that in other markets as well, where the MVNOs grow to a point where the MNO says, hey, I want to buy you. I want to buy you because I think you've got a good model or you've got a good brand, you've got a good go-to-market, and they get taken over by the MNO. But that's not our exit strategy. We're not doing this to be acquired by Celcom. We're doing this to show Celcom how it should be done.
Okay.
You happy with that?
Yeah, I think it's... I think it's also interesting.
We're going to beat M1's acquisitions.
I think it'll be interesting to observe the market and whether the McKinsey study comes to pass, because I suppose if you take the McKinsey model to a logical conclusion, there won't be any distinction between MNOs and MVNOs because the network operators will have been spun off as separate businesses. MNOs will become MVNOs on the network operator's network, and then network operators are competing for the MVNO business. That's if you took the McKinsey model and took it to its logical conclusion that every MNO will spin off its network and then become an MVNO itself. And I think that's going to be an interesting observation for the market. I think from just to point out that MDS is in this game because we believe that however those MVNOs evolve, we're going to have to somebody's going to have to come up with a solution to allow them to monetize the market they're going after. And that's what we're helping redONE do, and we're hoping to help all the emerging MVNOs that come forward now with their focus on the customer interface.
And Steve, thank you. That's a fascinating model. And do you think if we fast forward this separation between NetCo and OpCo, do you think that opens the door to like so-called super MVNOs, so MVNOs of the likes of Google, Samsung, and Apple, who might offer connectivity embedded in their devices? How do you see that playing out?
It's an interesting one. I haven't got a fully thought through idea yet on that one. But I mean, when you see the likes of Liberty Global buying into sort of Formula One, you've got to feel that the companies that have the big, deep pockets can really take advantage of global MVNO reach And I think if they've got the investment dollars that they can throw at it, I think those players will emerge. Whether it happens regionally, whether a Google will focus on the US or whether they focus on a country than Europe, I'm not so sure. I mean, they've got better and quicker ways probably in which to monetize the relationship that they've got with their customers, that they don't necessarily need to invest in their networks. But if you've got companies like Azure and Amazon with their Amazon Web Services, they've got huge infrastructure investments already. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to suggest that with a few more extra dollars, they've got a network as well.
And Steve, while you were talking, there was a question coming in for you, which is about Africa. I know we've been talking about examples in Europe and in Asia, but someone from the audience wants you to go to Africa, essentially. So what's your comment there?
I mean, I think I'll share this question with my marketing director, Akil, but certainly, Africa is a market that we're not in yet, but certainly we hope that it is a market that we can tackle. I've just recently taken over my position, and certainly once we finished the current restructuring we're doing in the business, we're focusing very much on, how do we go beyond the UK and beyond Europe. And I think as well as Latin America and Southeast Asia, working with Farid and redONE, Africa is the next logical market for us to go after. So yes, watch this space.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah,
and
I think
so,
maybe.
Please,
yeah,
go ahead,
just to
Akil.
comment on that one also. One of the things we also do is we actually sort of track where sort of regulation is starting to happen for MVNOs to survive. We have been involved with a number of opportunities in Africa. And I think it goes back to what Farid said. You've got to have a fantastic relationship with the MNO in terms of the deal, the commitment you have on both sides. And if you've got MNOs which are very open for MVNOs to come through and support market penetration, it's great. But we found actually in some African countries, it's they do create an opportunity, but the MNOs are not either too friendly or the actual regulation is not strong enough. There tends to be a lot of sort of failures there from just a commercial point of view. So it's something we are tracking, and something if there is compelling opportunities for us to entertain in that market, we'll certainly be out there talking to the right opportunities for sure.
Thank you, Akil, and thank you, Stephen, for that. And I guess we go back into some of the points that Tony touched, which is the enterprise opportunity. And the question is very straightforward: is where do most MVNOs or operators struggle when entering the SME market, in your view? And I guess the follow-up is how do you help them in achieving what they want to achieve?
That question is for me, Dario, yeah?
Yes, it's
for Tony. Yeah, I think it goes back to what I was discussing on that slide, is that at the moment, most MNOs have a platform to serve the B2C market, and they do that reasonably well. You could argue that a small percentage of them actually provide a true digital experience, and that's the opportunity for the MVNO. But they do have a B2C platform, and they generally speaking have a platform to serve the large enterprises, the Shells of this world, the large banks, the insurance companies, and they have a sales force that they dedicate to serving those companies. And it's because their business is very substantial. The likes of a Barclays Bank in the UK might have something like 20,000 mobile connections that they want to procure from either the MNO or a B2B MVNO. What's interesting is they don't have a platform that serves the small to medium enterprise market. They fall between the cracks, and that's why we see in that marketplace that small to medium enterprises have multiple service providers. And that's a gap in the market, and I think it's an opportunity that's absolutely begging to be served. Someone that comes to market that builds a self-serve model because the cost to serve them with a sales force and dedicated call agents is probably not viable. But if I can build a digital app that allows 50 or 60 or 100 employees to share a single quota, or I optimize their usage and drive down the cost for the SME, but I also give an administrator the functionality to be able to control and manage the spend of the employees. So I think it's a market that's not served and is crying out to be served.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Yeah, I think I personally would agree with you. We have a couple of technical questions back again to redONE, Farid. One is for your unlimited music option, whether you use DPIs for that. And the other question is, what is your BSS OSS setup, who you are using essentially?
Well, I think I mentioned this. Currently in Malaysia, the BSS we are using is homegrown. But for the prepaid real-time billing, we actually use Celcom. Celcom's vendor. In Thailand, it is MDS.
No surprise.
Surprise. For unlimited music, well, since we've only done that in Malaysia, we actually whitelist those IP addresses. So it's not for all unlimited music. It's for the popular ones, Spotify, etc. On the Celcom PCRF side, we don't use DPI. They just get the IP range and they whitelist those, so the data is not charged.
Okay, so it's basically when the subscriber buys the service plan, they know already which service is going to be zero rated rather than any service is going to be zero rated.
Correct.
Okay, and you've again with you, Farid, you're talking about your regional expansion plans, and obviously you mentioned a global SIM card, and I think you mentioned the fact that in every country you want to use a local identity, meaning probably a local MZ, but the question is specifically about whether there is a Roam like home element to the service. Roam like home, probably, if I understand the question from the audience, is whether the same data that is on the subscription at home can be used internationally.
Well, between redONE Singapore and redONE Malaysia, in fact, we already do that. You can use your redONE Singapore data quota in Malaysia with no additional roaming charges. Many thanks to StarHub, our trusty MNO in Singapore, for allowing us to do that. But not all telcos in the region are as capable. I mean, believe it or not, some MNOs around here don't even have camel roaming. So you can't even get the real-time roaming CDRs, which creates a lot of bill shock. So it's going to have to be a bit of a hybrid model, depending on the market and depending on which redONE country is being visited and where they're originating from. We're likely to see a bit of a hybrid model. But the easiest way is if everyone has a local profile, and it automatically switches when you enter into the other country.
Thank you. And we're, I think, approaching the hour, but I want to go back to Steve with this question. Steve, you mentioned that there is a macro movement in the market towards structural separation, which alludes to the fact that eventually MNOs themselves also need to restructure some of their operations. And the question is whether MDS Global has any direct experience in helping in their restructuring.
Not directly in so much as are people doing it today, no, but the early discussions have started, and I think it's the emergence of 5G that's kind of driven a lot of those discussions. Obviously, there's the financial attractiveness that separating the network and the service companies offers the shareholders. I think that's going to be a constant pressure, and I think regulators will possibly have a part to play in that as well. But no, we have had some initial discussions with players on how perhaps they need to think about this going forward. But we anticipate that this is probably something that's going to emerge in the next 2 to 3 years. So it's early days yet, but the early discussions have started.
Thank you, Steve. And with your last comment, Steve, I think we've reached the full hour of our presentation webinar, and we have many additional questions, and I don't think we have time to go through all of them, but I would like to thank Steve, Farid, and Tony for their outstanding presentations and for the openness by which you answered the questions. And it's really nice to see real life examples when people are presenting. I just want to give a reminder to everybody who's logged into the webinar that you will receive a follow-up email which includes a link to the recording of the presentation and the Q&A today. And I really hope you found this event useful. It certainly was for me, even it was part of it. Once you leave the event, there is a short survey that will pop up in your browser. We appreciate your feedback and help us building even better webinars in future. And finally, I want to thank MDS Global for making this event happening. And I wish everybody a good rest of the day. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dario.